Welcome to Embedded, a show about the many aspects of engineering. I'm Elecia White.
I'm Christopher White.
And we don't have a guest this week. It's just going to be us talking to each other.
And the cat refused to join us.
I know. She's very, very difficult. And we are mostly going to be addressing listener questions, emails, whatnot, and then talking about Chris's hobbies.
What?
That's the plan.
All right.
Didn't you get the memo?
Maybe whatnot will run long.
Maybe not. In fact, that makes me tempted to start with, weren't you on another podcast recently? Weren't you cheating on us?
I was on a podcast. It wasn't recently. It was about a month ago, but it just recently dropped on iTunes. Well, are we going to just jump in like that? Just jump right in?
Is this a show?
Just no small talk?
What, you want me to lightning round you?
Sure.
Pretty funny when married people do it.
Title. Yes, I was on a show called Let's Drone Out. I was invited by some nice folks in the UK, and we talked about RC aircraft and drones for about an hour. It was great fun. There were more of them than I expected, so it was different than a one-on-one interview. It
was more of a panel.
Yeah. It was a fun show.
So you were invited because you started playing with your airplanes again.
Yes, playing with my airplanes again.
I'm sorry, that really didn't come out right. You had added a GPS module, you had added
cameras,
a camera, and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
To, a
largish airplane.
Largish, but RC controlled electric airplane.
Yeah.
Okay. And then after that, you immediately needed a quadcopter.
What? No, what? That's not what happened.
Are you sure?
I was bullied into it by my brother because he has one. So.
Yes, that is true.
But no, I mean, part of the reason the quadcopters are interesting is because they're a little easier to deal with in terms of taking off and landing once you get proficient enough to do so without crashing into yourself.
Nice caveat.
But planes, taking off isn't such a big deal because you can hand toss them, but landing, you do have to have some approach distance and some form of field and no trees and stuff. So I got a little nervous about flying in various places that I thought I would fly, but probably won't end up doing because there's too many people and not enough room. So quads are interesting in that you can kind of fly them anywhere, and they're small. I mean, it's a plane is a big plane to carry all those electronics. It has maybe a 1.5 or a 3/4 meter to a meter wingspan and lots of big stuff to haul around. But a decent quad, is a foot long.
And hopefully it won't get stuck in a tree.
Yeah. Has less cross section for getting branches stuck into it. Yeah.
So this quad has like 7 ARM processors.
Yeah. So what I ended up getting is this is a Vortex racing quad, and they're the code name is a 2. It used to be nothing, but then they brought out a 250, and that's just I think it's the millimeters from one end of the diagonal to the other, and this one's a 285. So Vortex 285. And I kind of wanted to build one of my own, but then I kind of wanted to get used to flying them first. And so I kind of compromised and bought one that's basically pre-built and ready to fly, but it's pretty hackable. The flight controller computer runs open source software called Clean Flight, which is pretty cool and does all sorts of stuff that I haven't even scratched the surface of. And this one has a bunch of extraneous other fun stuff, like it has an LED panel in the back, which looks a lot like a, what do you call it?
NeoPixels.
Yeah, NeoPixels, which has its own microcontroller driving it, so you can play games with that. It has an on-screen display, which goes onto the video input. So as you're flying these things, you actually have either goggles or a screen on. You're not watching them because it turns out they're so fast and so small that in about 10 seconds, they're outside of your field of view, unless you're an eagle. So you actually fly them first person. There's a camera up front. It transmits down on a 5.8 gigahertz band to either goggles you're wearing, which display it in front of your eyes, or an LCD screen, and you fly like you're flying in an airplane. And so it has another microcontroller, which muxes in a video overlay, which gives you all sorts of information like artificial horizon, your altitude and speed, and whether your battery's about to die and good stuff like that. So it's pretty fun to fly. Once you get used to it, it's kind of like having your own little jet airplane.
Because I think you did better once you started sitting down.
Yeah, there was some disorientation issues initially.
Because this is really like your hands are moving the RC controller, which is pretty complex and programmable.
Right.
And then this is your whole field of view. There is no, I'm looking at the quadcopter and now I'm looking at the field. No, it's just all quadcopter.
If somebody wants to clock me over the head and take my wallet, I won't be able to see them coming.
It was easy to sneak up on you.
Yeah. So initially I just, I'm having fun flying it, but then, I've got a lot of ideas for playing around with the firmware, putting a Raspberry Pi on it and maybe doing some machine vision experiments. It's amazing. It's another one of these demonstrations of what's happened with the low cost of microcontrollers and the ARM revolution, because this thing has 7 ARM Cortex processors on it. And
we know that because it was part of their advertising, which just, I'm like, who would make that part of your advertising?
Right. And it's not like it's really expensive. I mean, it's a few $100s, but it's not like $1,000 where you'd have, we have so many microprocessors doing stuff. It's, it's so cheap to just throw one in places that you might not have thought to throw one before, where you'd have an analog board in the past, like the speed controllers for the motors. There's 4 arms, and each arm is probably a Cortex M0. I know it's a Cortex something, but I'm not sure which part. And their job is just to do the current control for the motors commanded by the central flight controller. So instead of having the flight controller have to talk to an analog board and continuously output a PWM or something for each arm.
Given the motors around here, if it's doing it all analog and moving off over the space, it's going to be noisy. So this lets it have good signals. It just
issues a command and says, well, okay, motor 4, you're at 75%, and leave it there until I tell you to do something else. And then the little Cortex M0 in the arm, okay, I'm just driving this motor. So from that standpoint, it's a cool kind of decentralized architecture to have all these little microcontrollers. So you can have one that's master control, but you can have little ones at the leafs, at the edges, that are just taking commands and doing the analog stuff right at the edge. So I don't know, it's kind of amazing.
In looking at this LCD controller, which is one of the ones I can see, it's got a USB jack.
That's the main USB that goes to the flight controller. So I don't know how that's routed exactly. I think it probably goes to the bigger Cortex M3 that's the flight controller, and then it can deliver firmware updates to anything else. And
then you've got this camera on here. As you said, you actually sort of a VR system, except what's the opposite of VR? It's like reality, but not your reality.
Distance reality. Projected reality. Astral projection.
Yeah, this is very much astral projection into a quadcopter.
Yeah.
Your soul now is here. Yeah. Does that bother you?
A little bit, especially when I bounce it off the ground. Yeah. This actually has 2 cameras. It's got the camera down there, which is just a regular analog camera that goes to the radio transmitter, and then that orange thing is a video camera, so I can record flights at higher quality.
You 2 cameras on here,
yeah,
as well as 4 flight controllers, or 4 motor controllers, and a flight controller and an LCD controller, and you must have a couple more. I mean, I suspect there's an inertial system in here that
I think it's got
feeds into the flight controller.
I think it's got a Bosch IMU.
Okay.
And there is an optional port for GPS, which I ordered from eBay but disappeared.
The postal system.
Games I can play with GPS just by plugging it in. So yeah, it's a pre-built system, but it's hackable enough that if I want to play around with the firmware, I can do that without building something from spare parts.
So the flight controller is open source.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of crazy to me, because you can do a lot with a flight controller.
There's a lot of different open source flight controllers. This is just one of them.
And what is it called?
Clean Flight.
And have you looked at the code at all?
I've looked at it just a little bit. I poked around the GitHub, but there's a lot there. It has a lot of features, some of which this doesn't handle. And and some that aren't quite finished yet. So a lot of the GPS kind of functionality, like return to home, which is kind of a nice feature if you get lost or if the radio cuts out. I'm not sure that's quite done yet, but so there's areas to contribute there.
It's pretty stable I still have this bias that open source software is not stable.
It's running most of the world. So if that's not true, we're in deep trouble.
But it's still, things like this that are clearly hobby centric, I think are usually less stable. But this seems pretty stable.
I don't think there's any issues with it. I don't see a lot of people complaining, oh, things fell out of the sky.
And you're not going to blame that for when you did fall out of the sky?
No, that was because I was
showing off,
reaching beyond my capabilities. Yeah, I thought, well, I can do a roll. Why don't I try a loop? And then it ended aiming straight up, and I didn't know where it was. So I just turned the engine off and let it fall to its death, which wasn't a big death. No, I mean, when you have a lot of enthusiasts contributing stuff, I mean, people into this do racing and things. And
I saw the videos for the racing.
They're cruising through forests at 70, 80 miles an hour on these courses, avoiding obstacles, and they're like 3 feet off the ground. They're not flying around like, you take your DJI Phantom up at 100 feet and take pictures of your house or something. These guys are cruising around at 80 miles an hour, and this will do that. I'm nowhere near good enough to do anything with it. It's. I mean, you watch these videos on YouTube. It's like watching the forest.
You can be an Ewok.
The speeder.
Ewoks never played, but you can be the people on the speeders.
It's pretty much being doing the speeder thing in Return of the Jedi. So it's pretty amazing. So yeah, I think if people are passionate about something, they want it to work well, and I think they're willing to contribute and make sure it works well. I think the projects that have the most trouble are the ones that don't have a lot of contributors.
Well, it's hard. I mean, it's hard to get contributors because there are other people giving up their time for free. And then if you have a good idea, there's always the possibility that somebody else has it, and then you're splitting your contributor base.
Right.
I suspect that Clean Flight probably has some sponsorship by like the quadcopter vendors.
I have no idea. I don't really know how that works. I mean, they don't...
It's never really free. Nothing's ever really free.
Yeah, and these guys, the one who makes my quad, I think they have to, qualify Clean Flight before they put a new version on their site. They make sure that it works, or they make small tweaks for their products. So there is some of that going on too, where it's like, okay, here's the base Clean Flight, and you can run it if you want. But if you want, specific updates that are tuned to this quad, then wait for us to add in the specific stuff. But I haven't really dug into the software enough to really say.
But you got started with Raspberry Pi. You took my Raspberry Pi out of the box, and then you complained a lot about how I'd set it up.
What?
No?
No, it just was in bad shape.
What's the difference? If I was the last one to touch it.
Because it had bad blocks on the SD card, so I'm not sure how...
Oh, we're going to blame the SD card. Okay, good.
It's not your fault at all. It just was broken.
Yeah. Go on believing that.
Anyway.
And then you hooked up the camera and did Python and OpenCV.
Yeah. So I had this dumb idea we're really just going to talk about my dumb ideas?
Oh, that was really my plan. I didn't write a lot of show notes this time.
I wanted to learn a little bit about machine vision stuff. So I had this dumb idea way back before I got the quad that I would stick a Raspberry Pi on the quad and have it fly around and aim itself at some fiducial marker, like a red ball or maybe some sort of QR code or something I could see and figure out easily. So
I think it would be cool if you could have a red ball in your hand and then like dance with the quadcopter, and then a blue ball in the other hand, a different quadcopter, and you can control them by making them
that would be
mimic you. Yes, it would be very cool.
That would be very cool. Many things would be very cool.
Okay, so are you done yet?
Anyway, the original idea was to have it pick up a ball and then drop it into a basket or something.
Robot soccer.
And then I realized the limits of my abilities with all of this stuff, and I've downsized to a robot instead of a flying device to start with. So now the idea was to stick it on one of these insect-like hexapod robots that I have, and just have it follow something. You're holding a red ball, have it turn to face you or whatever. So yeah, I loaded up the Raspberry Pi. OpenCV and Python are fairly friendly to get up and running on there. And played around a little bit, but it's painfully slow on an original Pi. I mean, I'm maybe doing almost no processing, is a couple frames per second. So it's not...
You were looking for circles.
Yeah, trying to
no
auto-detect circles, and depending on the parameters, it was extremely slow.
Well, Pi loading the full-size images was slow for me.
It wasn't full-size. I downsized it. It's just too computationally intensive.
Or Python loading images.
Well, I don't know if it's Python's fault or not, because I expect it's running the OpenCV normal library from bindings, so I don't think it's running in Python. So if that's that slow, it may just be that slow. But then, a couple of days ago, I started saying, well, let's port this to C++, which isn't working that well.
What's gone wrong?
So I didn't want to have the whole development environment on the Pi because it's painfully slow.
And that's actually where I ended up last time. I think we had the same problem.
So I tried to set up a cross-compile environment. I spooled up a little Ubuntu VM, which is fine. Followed most of the instructions for bringing a cross-compiling environment up on the Pi, which was fine. Ran Hello World. That all worked. It's getting the libraries to work. So there's a library to run the camera called RaspiCam or RasPiCam or however you want to say it. And it installs itself into one place, and the makefile system that they want to use is CMake, which I'm familiar with but not excited about. And things get installed in places with absolute paths. And long story short, I can't make it work.
Hours of searching.
Yeah, I just can't make it work. And I'd have to go in and hack something in the make files that I don't really want to touch. And so this is another one of those things where, and I think I tweeted a snarky comment about this, but you get an idea in your head to do something, and then you start examining the reality of it.
Well, I think this is worse. You get an idea, you realize it's possible, and that you actually have what you need to do it. And then you get shot in the foot by CMake, which is not what you want to spend your afternoon doing. If you're,
I have to learn a build system. But this is true of everything, right? There's always some piece of the system that you don't know you have to learn when you embark on a project that's mundane and stupid. Well, not necessarily stupid, but mundane and bookkeeping. Tedious. And, I remember this from grad school too. There was always, I'm going to do some fluid dynamics simulation. And then you spend 4 days trying to solve an integral or simplify some big math expression, which is all just bookkeeping. And it's not what you want to be doing. And it's getting over that not what you want to be doing part that's not such a big deal when it's your job because somebody's paying you, I guess. And you
have to do it.
You kind of have to do it. And it's part of, step by step. When you're doing a personal project, I don't know. For me, I feel like there's the motivational factor is much more, I want to see this working. And the longer and further out that gets, the harder it is to have intermittent milestones where, this is working a little bit. This is working a lot more. This is finally working the way I want. If that first step from 0 to that first milestone is like 2 weeks of figuring out something that I really am not that interested in, like a build system, I'm just not going to continue. So I understand in some ways where people who stick with Arduino, and Python and things where you can not have to worry about some of those issues are coming from. So anyway, frustration.
But you have a long list of potential projects.
Yes. Yeah.
And one of them I sort of mentioned at some point long ago that involved ocean things. Will you describe that idea? I know you're not working on it, but describe it.
I did on the podcast at some point, but the basic idea was watching some folks on Twitter, Stuart McAndrew, apologize if I've got the name wrong. He's been working on CubeSats for a long time. And I thought, well, that should be applicable to terrestrial stuff. So what if you made a CubeSat that just floated in water and had a GPS and Iridium radio, and you toss it out of a boat or something and have it float and just follow where it goes, and maybe take some environmental data, temperature, and that kind of stuff. But that was the basic idea.
And then, if somebody found it, if it washed up, it would say, take a picture, email, tweet,
Sure.
whatever, and then throw me back.
Right.
It would be neat to have a little wanderer.
Yeah. So that was the idea. I have lots of dumb ideas. I just don't do any of them.
You have more ideas. I mean, I tend to not make a list. It's funny. I think I always have a to-do list that's usually very long, and then I just look at it and choose a couple of tasks, and that's all. I don't think about it much. I just use that to make sure I don't forget about stuff, or to realize that it's been on my to-do list for a week, so it must not be useful and I should just cross it off. And you made this list of all the projects you want to work on.
Yeah. And because I'm paralyzed by indecision.
Okay, let's go through this list.
Didn't help. Well, this list includes things that are not technical things. These are other hobbies that I have that I've let go, or things like that as well.
Yeah, we really do need more surfing lessons, don't we?
That's not on here.
Why not?
I forgot.
You should have had it.
All right, go surfing. So I'm just supposed to read this list?
No, I figured you'd read one and then I would...
How about the listeners tell me what to do, and I'll just do the one they tell me.
Okay, go ahead.
Big list of things to do / projects. That is the title.
Okay.
OpenCV experiment. OpenCV experiments with Hexapod and Raspberry Pi.
Okay, we talked about that. Yeah.
GPS experiments with the drone and clean flight.
You just need the GPS to come in and then to play with that a little bit with what they have, and then to start writing other software.
Yeah.
What do you want it to do? Do you want to have geocaching, but with quadcopters?
I have no idea what that would mean.
I don't either.
Just have one hovering until somebody finds it?
Sure.
Well, since the battery only lasts 4 minutes, I don't think that's going to work.
Okay. So
next, this is going to take a long time. Learn to fly drone.
Hey, you actually did pretty good on that.
So I
last
can
time.
almost check that off.
Because earlier you did, there was a little bit of crashing, but the last time we went, there was no crashing.
Remote 3G based weather monitor with the Electron single board thingy.
That's a cell modem.
The cell modem, yes, from Particle.
And we were thinking about putting that at our local beach and having it tell us when everything is just right for us to head down there instead of.
So that's actually probably a weekend project. Practice with bare metal bring-ups on dev kits, because I haven't done this very much, and I feel like it's hard, and I feel like I should get some practice on it for just continuing development kind of education. And we have all these dev kits around, so it seemed like I could bring them all up in IR. But then you told me that was easy, so I got less interested.
Well, I mean, it's easy because you do it a lot, and because most of the vendors now have
done it a lot. That's
example kits. Well, I mean, you use the systems. You're not unfamiliar with IAR or the compilers.
Too familiar.
Yeah. But I actually had to bring up a Kinetis K60, which is no longer Freescale. Now it's NXP. I was a little confused, but then I remembered. Anyway, I had to bring that up today, and I looked at the board, and I know it came with demo code, but I didn't really care what the demo code was going to do. And so I just went online and found their big box of bare metal examples and pulled it down to my local drive, found the example that was closest to what I wanted to do, compiled, and ran it.
Okay.
And now I have to strip out all the cruft and then make it so it doesn't compile with warnings. What the hell, people? Why do you examples compile with warnings? Why?
See, I wasn't thinking about just grabbing some examples and throwing it on there. And I was thinking of making it work from scratch.
Well, that's the thing. I have made things work from scratch, but I don't hardly ever anymore. There's always
I wasn't saying
some
I
example.
wasn't saying that was something I wanted to do as a, now I'm going to do this every time I have a new project. It was a learning experience. It was a refresher course.
I mean, I guess I had a client who had to port some startup and hard fault code from Kyle to GCC, and we're kind of baffled with the idea that there are multiple assembly dialects.
Right.
And yeah, okay, I guess I knew that because of startup.s being an important thing, but
All right, I'll just take that one off because
that one doesn't sound like fun.
None of them are fun.
Is anybody paying you for these?
No.
Man.
Next one. Write new theme song.
Oh yeah, and outro.
Oh, okay, fine, and outro.
Yeah.
Great. No, I was just going to use the old theme song as the outro. Next one, re-record a song that I've been working on for years so that my brother can play guitar over it.
Okay.
Next one, relearn piano well enough to play Beethoven Sonata that I was working on a year ago and then stopped again. Continue in the video game course, which we have not been continuing on because somebody keeps saying, I don't want to.
No, yesterday I was willing to and you weren't.
That will be taken out of context. Next, Unity.
But you did do some Unity stuff.
Sort of. And that's the next one. Unity physics experiments. Make a drone simulator, ? Little 2D physics things, ?
You did a little tiny drone simulator. It was pretty cute.
It was a drone simulator in the same way that I'm drawing a blank on a metaphor here.
In the same way that was a metaphor?
Those wind-up bath toys are an aircraft carrier or an actual. So, from scratch flight controller, and that includes learning the physics of drone flight control.
Yeah, don't set the bar very high there.
Well, it doesn't have to be good, but I found some papers on the physics, and my physics is getting rusty, and it might be fun to go through that and fly, badly, or at least have it hover.
Hovering's hard.
Hovering's hard?
I would think so.
Why?
The stability there just...
What's the whole point of a flight controller is to keep it stable?
Oh, all right. Well, then I guess so.
Ocean Probe Project, which we talked about. Audio processing experiments with DSPs and music kind of stuff. Learn guitar. Take online course on something. You can see I'm sort of kind of flailing. Yeah. Go back and do some more astrophotography. Get my equipment together for that, which I haven't touched in years.
No, and I foolishly, when we moved, put the telescope near our bedroom so that you could take it out, and then you told me you can't take it out on the deck because it's too wobbly.
Yep. And the last two I just
really
came up
heavy.
with. It's not that heavy. Last two I came up with this week. Spherical drone.
Yeah.
Nobody tell me if these have already been done because I'm really excited about these. Spherical drone, which involves not a quadcopter, but probably a dodecahedrocopter.
Good.
Dodecahedrocopter. I just came up with that and I am keeping it.
You should go get dodecahedrocopter.com right this second.
Dodecahedrocopter.com. Okay. And then it's probably its predecessor, which is spherical servo-driven rolly ball.
But this isn't like BB-8's spherical.
No. I want it to have
Tell
feet.
me about this.
It has little feet. It's a sphere of it's hard to describe. Some of those lamps, they have like radial, it's like from a central point and there's radial, let's say sticks coming out of equal length.
So if a starfish is 2D, this would be 3D?
Sure, go with that. A 3D starfish. And then on the end of each rod is a foot, maybe like a Nerf dart kind of thing.
With the sucker at the end?
Sure.
Okay.
And then those are connected to servos, and they can push or pull. And then has a Arduino or some microcontroller in it that makes it roll by pushing the right ones in the right sequence.
So this would be like a rolling, stiff cush ball.
Yeah.
All right.
Dodecahedra
ball.
No, that doesn't work.
Dodecahedra walking robot.
Yeah. So these are the things, and I'm leaving several thousand things off here, but these are all in my head all the time. So when I go to start one, I spend 4 minutes on it and then think, well, I should really be working on the other thing, and then I think I should be working on the other thing, and then I go and surf Twitter.
And so you made a list so that you could prioritize and stay focused?
Yeah. And it's not working at all.
Well, I mean, you made progress on the Pi, so...
I made enough progress on the Pi to know I hate everything and don't want to use computers anymore.
Well, I have been so in that state for
what I really
weeks.
should do, and probably the answer is, since those roadblocks bother me, is I should eliminate them. And if I don't want to learn enough to force the cross-compilation environment to work by hacking CMake or whatever, then I should just punt and not do that and get one of the quad-core Raspberry Pis and just build directly on it. I think I'm starting to come to the conclusion that I don't need to be a first principles person on things. This is what happened to me in school too, is I often would get bogged down in first principles instead of just taking what they were selling, Okay, here's the equation, do this. Yeah, but where'd that come from? And I'd spend 3 days in the library, trying to figure out the fundamental physics behind something that I didn't have the machinery to do yet, which is why they were just giving me the formula. But that happens to me with this stuff too. And I was like, oh, well, I feel really guilty. I should learn CMake well enough to be an expert in it. But why? I just want to make this thing go. So,
well, this is why a lot of things are sort of circles. You get started with Arduino because you can make a lot of progress. And then if you like it, you can go to something where you get more flexibility and you learn more. But the constant measurable progress is really important.
Yeah, but I'm supposed to be an expert.
I know. And I feel like with our hobbies, sometimes we try to be experts. Well, not with my latest project.
We'll talk about that in a second. Yeah, and that that gets me bogged down in, why don't I understand this? Well, if I'm an expert, I should be able to learn this in an hour. And then I go read, docs for CMake. I'm like, what is this thing? I get it, but come on.
Yeah, I get CMake on the surface, but in this particular instance where somebody 9 libraries down hard-coded a path,
yes,
I don't know how to fix that because I don't even know how to figure out.
Right. So anyway, enough. Probably bashing CMake more than it deserves, but it's hard to get started on stuff, and self-motivation is tricky, especially when you do this for a living too. It's hard to come off a few hours of fighting with something or hacking with something and then go do something else frustrating, or that becomes frustrating that's supposed to be your fun project.
Or like I coded for a lot of Sunday and then I got up Monday morning and I was like, oh,
I don't want to do paying work.
No, I don't want to do this.
Yeah. So if anybody, wants to tell me which of those many things I should do, that'd be great. If
anybody would like my suggestions.
What are your suggestions?
I don't know. It's just a matter of, repaint areas and rehang pictures and do gardening crap.
Oh, your list is practical.
My list for you is practical. My list for myself is not always.
I see. Anyway, well, that's that.
Okay.
But that was started with the drone show thing, which we should mention again.
Right.
I didn't mention
What's
all
it
of
called?
it. Let's Drone Out was the show, and they are live every Thursday at 8 p.m. GMT +1 on a website called, I believe it is called poweringon.co.uk.
Okay. Those will be in the show notes along with a link to Christopher's particular episode.
Yes.
Okay. So my project, which
yes.
was the first thing that sounded interesting to me after weeks of, I don't want to do anything. I'm just going to do what I have to do to get by, is for Bring a Hack. Which, it's Bring a Hack. You're supposed to bring a hack. This is one of the things that happens around Maker Faire.
Post Maker Faire.
Osh Park sponsors it, and Lane is fantastic for doing it. And it's Sunday night after Maker Faire closes at, it's still at BJ's Pizza, I think.
BJ's Pizza in San Mateo, and I think it is from 8 to midnight.
6 to midnight.
6 to midnight.
And it's free. Osh Park really sponsors it. And lots of people come, and I think it's a great way to meet other engineers because we don't tend to get...
And hobbyists.
Oh, yeah, well, yes. But it's... I don't know, when you get a lot of engineers in a room, sometimes it's either cliquey or it's just... Everybody gets awkward. But because you have your own... Since you are supposed to bring a hack...
You have something to talk about.
You have something to talk about. And I just think it's a genius idea that you have something to talk about.
Yeah.
So I wasn't really going to bring anything to Bring a Hack. Well, I might have... Oh, we're getting a new logo soon. I might have managed to bring t-shirts, but we'll see if the new logo is done by then. So, my plan for Bring a Hack was, embedded FM stickers. I wasn't, I don't know, I might pull out a ring or something I've made. I don't know. But then as I was feeling kind of, I hate all technology, we were watching cartoons, and it was the evening after I had broken down a bunch of boxes, which is something I find very soothing. Like Amazon send us boxes, and then I use a box cutter and I destroy them. And there's just this constructive destruction that I find quite satisfying when I'm in a bad mood, which I had been for a while. And so we're watching cartoons, and John Johns, the Martian Manhunter guy, goes up to this robot, and he like puts his hand in and he pulls out this fistful of wires, and the robot like acts differently for a little while, and then it dies. And then later in that same episode, Superman turns to Johns and says, "Are you having a good time?" And even though this cartoon guy is usually very, very serious, he doesn't have much of a sense of humor. He said that he was in fact having a good time causing all this mayhem.
Yeah, I think he just said yes.
He just said yes, but all the rest was very implied.
Yes.
So I was thinking about these ideas of constructive destruction and fistful of wires and being amused by that. And so I decided that my Bring a Hack is called Fistful of Wires, and it's going to be a bag, and you can reach in and pull out some wires, and it will change the behavior of the audio, motor, and light subsystem inside the bag. And I'm just really amused by this. It's terrible. I mean, it's got everything I hate. It's got audio. It's got so
flashing
much hot
lights.
glue. It's got flashing lights, and yet I am so amused.
Well, see, now this is the kind of thing I think I should be doing. It's more silly, fun stuff that doesn't really have a point, because maybe we do things that have a point too much, and it's a good side way into. I mean, you've learned to do some audio stuff.
It hasn't been high levels of learning. I mean, because I'd already played with the NeoPixels, and putting it on an embed-enabled platform was no big deal. Yeah. And I did finally get to load up my Adafruit sound effects board, which has been fun. But, that took all of an hour. And then the 6 hours choosing audio effects.
Right.
But I like it as a craft project more than anything else, because it's just... Right now, it's still single wires you pull out, but I have this plan to make it so that even though you're only pulling out one single wire a year, you still get sort of a handful.
Sure.
So yeah, that's what I've been working on.
Definitely in the spirit of Bring a Hack.
Yes, and although I think some people are gonna be like, I don't understand.
Tough.
Why is this cool? And I'm like, this is like performance art, man.
Those are the people you have reach into the other bag that's got the charged capacitor.
No. So, yeah, I guess I have some projects like you do, some projects that I want to do that I don't have time for, but I don't have a big list. I think the other thing that's been on my list was a natural language processor Twitter bot that I could just replace myself on Twitter with a Twitter bot.
All right.
It would read my Slack channel, and anytime something looked amusing, it would post it to Twitter.
Yeah, nothing could go wrong with that.
No.
All right. Should we, is it time for follow-ups?
I guess so. Let's talk about listener stuff. First of all, thank you to Trigva, who wrote us about the Amp Hour show, where he was hoping to hear about a chip designer. No, I'm sorry. He was hoping to hear about a ship designer, but it turned out they were talking to a chip designer, and he was disappointed. And I did not know why you were writing to our show about that, except for the possibility that if we had said ship designer, we would have had a ship designer, which then made me go look for ship designers. But I haven't
next
found
week,
one.
folks.
But apparently the Amp Hour in their post statement at one point said to send us comments. You are welcome to send us comments about us or the Amp Hour.
Or anything else.
Whatever. Although if you're going to send us feedback of the I hate that sort. It goes a lot further if you manage to structure it in the form of, I didn't like that so much. I think you needed more information here and here, and I'm an expert, and I would be happy to help you either on or offline. Those sorts of emails I really like. Your speaker spoke too fast, or your guest had nothing to do with embedded, despite the fact that she hosts a show called Embedded. Yeah. Do you guys understand? I got to interview an NPR host. Who do you think we do this show for? I mean, like, really, who do you think we do this show for?
Checking our subscriber count, and it is declining 100 people a minute now. Soon our only listener will be...
my phone.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I did enjoy doing Kelly's show, and I thought it was amusing that I asked her technical questions, and she replied with political answers, and it just cracks me up every time I think about it. As for the embedded show, I've been listening to it. It is more political than, I don't know if political. It's more sad. I'd rather hear about technology, which is another question we got. Can you recommend other podcasts that look at embedded engineering?
Besides the Amp Hour, Spark Gap, which I think has gone on hiatus.
Yeah.
Embedded engineering. Andre had one that he listens to. Oh no, that was Chris Gamble said one just started up.
Well, and there's the Engineering Commons for general engineering stuff.
Yes.
They're not specific embedded, but they're nice people. Saron about software, I was pretty pleased with her podcast. It's very easy to listen to. It's not super technical, and yet it does creep in, often at odd moments.
Yeah.
You listen to other software ones?
Not really.
Nothing you'd recommend?
Not for somebody looking for embedded stuff.
So yeah, I don't know a lot. If you other listeners do know some, I would be happy to talk about some of the others, because it is nice to have podcasts. Although if you are looking for one or looking for some of the ham radio ones get into embedded systems again.
Yep.
Not directly, but it's still a lot of the same overlapping information. So look for the ham radio, as well as, of course, our sworn enemies, the Amp Hour. Let's see. Feedback on Tori's show.
Yes. So we got some feedback that some of the things about liability were perhaps a little overstated.
So when we talked to our bookkeeper and tax preparer, Tori Chavez, we did mention that if you have a corporation, it's sort of an umbrella to hide under if somebody sues you. Of course, we mostly deal with it in the form of service agreements. If we take a contract that works out very badly for some reason, and they sue us because they don't believe we've never done this, but they don't believe we've fulfilled our end of the contract, then we only are liable for what's in our business. They can't go after our personal finances. And yet, if I went out, even if I was driving around going to a Radio Shack or an existing actual store.
Doing something for business,
and hit somebody with my car, no, that person can probably sue me and my business. So there are different levels of liability, and we are not lawyers.
Yeah.
Insurance is a good thing. And lawyers...
and contracts are a good thing.
Contracts are a good thing.
So, I mean, the idea is, yes, being a corporation can protect you. It cannot protect you from everything. Certainly, being a corporation is better than not being a corporation if you're dealing with clients on a regular basis or contract law. So,
yeah,
I think leaving it there is probably the best thing. And
yes.
If you have questions, consult a lawyer.
Yes. Okay. Do you have any favorite RTOSs? Or are we doing a lot of bare metal work these days?
Almost everything I do as an RTOS. ThreadX is the one that is kind of the IBM of the RTOS world. I don't think anybody ever got fired for using ThreadX.
They're pretty pricey.
Yes, they're pretty pricey. So what happens a lot of times is, you'll do a bake-off between a bunch of products, and there might be one that's free-ish, and somebody will say, well, what about support?
Yeah.
And so the company is more likely to spend a lot of money on an RTOS that might not be any different or better than one that's free, just because they've got somebody to yell at when something hypothetically goes wrong. Now, the number of times it's actually been useful turns out to be really small.
Well, and a lot of times those bake-offs look for one particular weird, tweaky feature involving stacked semaphores on top of
or
flags or
some
whatever.
Impossible to reproduce or prove latency, in a very synthetic situation.
And so you go with the expensive one because it ticks a box that nobody really cares about.
But I have to say, the ones I've used and seen, and you may differ, I don't see that there's lots of huge, gigantic, gaping differences.
Well, I have recommended Pumpkin Salvo because it is very similar to free RTOS. And yet, for $800, you get somebody to point at.
Yeah.
And so it's a cheap way to get a little bit of support.
But they're all providing kind of the same APIs. They all have a messaging system. They all have a scheduler. They all have some concept of threads and thread synchronization.
And maybe you get more with Ethernet or USB stacks.
Sure. But those are usually bolt-on things. They're not necessarily part of the core product. But it's nice if you can buy them all from the same person, if they're all, quality. I've used some heavier weight stuff. I've used Green Hills on bigger systems. That was quite nice, but very sophisticated. I mean, it did things, they had process protection, memory protection and things while still being an RTOS. They had concept of virtualization even 5-10 years ago, where you could take non-mission critical systems, parts of your system, and wall them off. So you could have an infotainment part of your software that was running Linux, but then have an RTOS, all be on the same system, and the RTOS would keep Linux, in a little box. So, there's varying levels of sophistication, but those tend to be extremely expensive. Whereas, ThreadX license might be a few $1,000s. A Green Hills license might be tens of thousands. So it depends on what you need. And I don't have any that I'm just jumping up and down to say, yes, always use this. I would certainly look at RTEMs. I would certainly look at free RTOS and go from there. And if somebody's saying, I need to have a support license, well, that opens up a different discussion sometimes. It's not necessarily about the quality of the system. It's about business relationships.
But there aren't any that I'm looking at for fun. And I do a lot of development bare metal still. It started to go that everybody wanted an RTOS, and now I feel like I'm sort of penduluming the other way that nobody wants an RTOS. It doesn't make sense.
With all the Internet of Things and Bluetooth and all that junk?
It's sort of like your quadcopter has a bunch of processors. It seems like people are buying a processor to do this. You load it with their code and you never change it.
No, I have no idea if that has an RTOS on it. I should look.
Be amusing.
Alvaro did write in to suggest,
Zephyr Project.
But
he was looking forward to playing with.
Yeah, Zephyr Project is a new-ish RTOS. Actually, I don't know if I'm lying about its age.
It's new to us.
New to us. It's from the Linux Foundation. Is that right? It's got the backing of the Linux Foundation, and it's a microkernel RTOS with the usual features. I don't know if there's anything specifically unique about it, but you can check it out at zephyrproject.org. They have a nicely organized website. It sounds like they are trying to keep things relatively straightforward. They have, a driver model that makes sense. I've read through that. It may not be what you're used to if they're trying to do some new modern things, but that might be cool.
Yeah, that would be on my list of things to talk about or to look at more. Let's see, on my list of things that I don't know much about, which includes Zephyr, Platform.io. A couple people have emailed and asked about that.
Yeah, I keep looking at it and thinking I've seen this before, and it's because people keep suggesting it and I keep looking at it.
It's not platform.io. That's
Yes,
something totally different. Don't go there.
Platformio.org. And it appears to be an IDE for, the Internet of Things, if you must.
It reminded me of like the embed compiler,
Yeah.
or there was another one. I want to say code builder. I'll have to look it up. But there are a couple of online compilers. And so it looked like that, but I haven't tried it.
Yeah, it's like a lot of these IDEs are trying to solve this problem of how do you take the vast number of frameworks and libraries that are now available and make it so they're integrated in your development environment so you can pick and choose and drop them in quickly. So that's one of its features.
CodeBender, that was it.
CodeBender. Yeah, it is. I'm glad somebody's out there thinking about these problems. I'm not sure this is, I don't know.
If you work at platformio.org, or somebody who does, connect us. It might be interesting to talk to them, to find out what they're doing and why and all that. So yeah, if you know somebody there. Also, if you know somebody at SpaceX. No begging for guests. Okay.
No, you can beg for guests. If it works, who cares?
Speaking of Green Hills.
Yeah.
That was like 12 topics back. Dennis Jackson emailed us and asked...
What does that have to do with greenhouse?
I'm getting there. He asked, what do most people use for their development operating system? Not their RTOS, but what do you program on?
Oh, okay.
And I said, well, it's 50-50 here, but we don't know. I think a lot of the compilers run more under Windows.
Or Linux.
IAR and whatnot. But GCC is building a lot of momentum, and that's really cool.
It is building momentum.
A lot of
GCC
people,
ain't the new kid on the block.
I know, but it is for embedded.
I guess.
I mean, if you want a business-ready compiler, not like Arduino.
Okay.
What other compilers would you say?
Compilers?
For embedded cross-compilers.
Kyle, IAR, GCC.
So 2 of those are Windows only.
I think Clang is still...
That would be Mac, but it's probably not.
It's not just Mac.
It's not just Mac.
No, Clang's just a compiler.
Oh, okay.
Runs on everything. Yeah.
Anyway, having not gotten a good answer from us, Dennis emailed Jack Ansel.
I see.
Who did not know the answer either. So that actually made me feel a lot better. But said that he asked at Green Hills, and they say most of the developers use Windows.
At Green Hills? That does not surprise me.
No. For most of the people who use their product.
Does their product run on macOS? It's kind of a...
That is sort of a
bias
chicken egg
problem there.
Confirmation bias sort of problem.
Do most people watching movies in Windows Media Player use Windows? Probably.
Dennis was specifically asking about FDA, FAA, security.
Yeah, I know.
Security environments.
It's what you're used to, because at most of the places that I can remember over the last 3 or 4 jobs, it's been mostly Mac. And either running Linux virtual machines to do things that couldn't be done on the Mac directly, or Windows virtual machines. My current client is mostly Mac. There's a few people who run Windows, but most people are running VMs. Yeah, the medical place I was at a while back, they were mostly PCs, Dells and such. But
most of my clients seem to use PCs, sometimes VMs. I had one client who did a lot of Linux development, and that was cool, but then they still had to have Windows in order to do lower level stuff. So yeah, I don't know if there's an answer. I don't know if there's a study. The next person I would ask would be Michael Barr, because he seems to take a lot of surveys.
Take a lot of surveys or give a lot of surveys?
Take the results of a lot of surveys. Give a lot of surveys.
All right.
English is a terrible language.
Especially when you use it incorrectly.
Okay, so emails. Someone was a little concerned about jobs and emails. If you email at embedded.fm for a contest or whatever, the only people who see it are me and Chris, and occasionally Andre or Chris Svek. Andre Chichak. Sorry, I guess he gets his whole name. And so if we are doing a contest, we are not getting your email for any reason. You do not go automatically on our newsletter. You do not get sent over to whoever did the contest for spamming later.
Yeah, we don't share emails with anybody.
No, and
it says that on the website.
Well, yes, but if people actually email show at embedded.fm, they may not see the part of the website that says we don't share.
We should hire a robot that takes those mails and have a third-party company send the mails back saying we don't share it with anybody.
Yeah, so when we run contests, we're not farming for emails. And some of you may have noticed that if you win a contest, I email you and say, can I share it with the providing company? Because we really don't share emails. So, yeah.
Yeah, we're not doing this. We don't get paid by the contest sponsors. We're just running the contests for fun, usually. So,
yeah.
It's not a backdoor sponsorship system. We're not getting paid by the email.
Yeah.
We're not getting paid. So, yes.
And then I wanted to say about the newsletter. The newsletter also, if you sign up for that, your email, you get once a week, you basically get the RSS feed from the blog and from the podcast, the show notes. And I only did a newsletter because some people really like to have it in their email. And if you do sign up for the newsletter, if the art comes in on the right day, I will probably put it on the newsletter there. So there might be a few benefits, but nothing that isn't, you get it in the next 24 hours. Let's see what else. The blog is still going. We usually manage 3 posts a week. Andre is still writing about Embedded Wednesdays and getting together what C is and how to use it. He hasn't started on a platform yet, but I think he's still headed towards the STM32 platforms. Chris Svek is writing about microprocessors and has started his platform, which is the MSP 430.
That's right.
There should be more letters after that, and I don't remember which it is.
No, that doesn't matter.
But he's blinking lights and talking about GPIO peripherals, and it's pretty cool because it's a very inside the chip view, and Andre's is more of an outside the chip view, and it's nice to have both. And then I'm writing about toys or whatever I decide to rant about that week.
And every week I edit a podcast.
And you often edit one or more of these. And by the way, three a week, and we are all cross-editing and writing, and it's a lot of work, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, so my next thing on my list is VR glasses.
VR glasses?
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know.
We can just take that off.
Okay.
Nothing to say there.
Well, I guess one of the other things to do with the blog is the Hackaday Open Judging, which is to say, at one point on this show, I said, if you have a Hackaday project, you want to know what a judge thinks of it. Since I'm not judging this year, but I'm supposed to be doing this advisor thing that nobody defined for me, I figured I'd advise you about your project. So if you want me to judge it, I will. Pending not everybody signing up. And then I'll write about it. And there's one of those up there on our blog if you want to see. I am a mean, cruel person. But, if you want to win, if you want to know what's missing in your project, I'll help you because it would be kind of cool if our listeners won. Surprisingly,
if you'd like me to insult you and your project, please.
It was not. No, I didn't.
Okay,
but it is true that I haven't gotten a whole lot of people saying me next.
I can't imagine why that would be.
I did get one person who's seriously considering it, and yet hasn't agreed yet. Well, that kind of covers my list. Do you have anything else?
I had a couple of things. There was, on the subject of podcasts, I found the thing that Chris Gamble mentioned, which was microfab.com has a podcast. And,
O'Reilly Hardware has a podcast, now that you say that.
Yeah, and Microfab's podcast is the Microfab Engineering Podcast. It's microfab.com, and they seem to talk about little electronics things, so it might be exactly what they're looking for. The other question that just came in on Twitter was, is there any podcast about electronics in Spanish similar to the AmpHour or Beta.fm? And I do not know the answer to that. So if anybody does...
We do have some listeners who I know are based in South America. So if you have any suggestions for that person, or if you don't know, you can be from anywhere and answer this question.
That's right.
Sometimes typing is easier.
The other thing I had was the Salia job ad, which I think I'm going to just not say anything about.
I don't think we can leave it there. So let me summarize. Salia has a job ad for a fairly junior position.
Support.
And it wants thousands of hours of all levels of development. And they are either going to find someone who is the shiniest unicorn in the universe, or they're going to hire a liar. And it is such an example of how not to write a job ad.
So without going into extreme details, I guess we're talking about this, but it had every kind of development. So first of all, it's a phone support job. Let's get that out of the way first. It's a phone support job. You're going to be answering calls from customers and helping them with their problems.
And they want thousands of hours of Java development.
But they want, it wasn't Java development, it was every kind of development.
Yeah.
It was, they want you to be a software developer with experience. They want you to be an analog electronics engineer with experience. They want you to be a front-end developer, which means website stuff, with experience. They want you to be a UI and UX designer with experience. Did I miss anything? Basically,
I'm sure you did.
If there was a discipline, you had to be at least a journeyman in it. And on top of that, they had a survey which asked questions about, how many thousands of hours you've used JavaScript, you've written in JavaScript in the last 2 years, how many hundreds of hours you've used their device. And I guess the reason it bugs me is they're free to look for whoever they want, of course.
Yes.
I think they're not going to find this person because
finding your unicorn.
They don't exist. But
if they did, why would they want your freaking support job?
Right. You're not going to find people looking for a phone support job who have these qualifications. So I'm very confused as to what they're thinking. And first off, this comes from a place of, I want Salia to do well. I like their product. I use it. And we have used it. We've had them on the show. I would like them to succeed. And it looks like they're, trying to navigate some direction changes. So I understand that they're trying some new things. When I look at that job posting as a senior engineer with 20 mumble years of experience, I get insecure.
I feel stupid.
I feel dumb. And I think...
Is this what support people now can do?
I think it's going to... This isn't just a problem with this particular job ad. I see this a lot with job ads. And so my point is not a specific one to this job ad. It is a industry-wide problem where there's kind of an inflation of the kinds of qualifications that people want for various jobs, to the point where if you don't have multiple degrees, it's not possible for you to fulfill them. And so people are either lying about what they're asking for and just hoping that, by casting a wide net, they're going to get all kinds of people, or they're, delusional. And when I look at a job like that and I get insecure, I can only imagine what people coming out of college or with 2 to 5 years experience who are changing jobs feel like when they see jobs like this. They're not going to apply. And so you're losing potential talent who might do really well at the job you're hiring for, who aren't even going to come in to talk to you. Because they're going to look at that and say, well, that's definitely not me. I may be an expert C and C++ embedded developer, but I don't have any analog electronics experience. And so that bothers me. It bothers me because it discourages people and it perpetuates this whole rock star, ninja, superstar mentality that everyone has to be just a unicorn in order to succeed in this industry. And you know what? Most people are just good people and good engineers. And some people are unicorns for a year, and then they're a good engineer for the rest of their career. And some people are just good engineers for 5 years, and suddenly they get onto some project that they're really hot about, and they're a unicorn. And it's not all that we're all geniuses all the time.
I wish that some of these job ads would be written for, if you don't know these 10 things, you are willing to learn them.
Well, that's what we were talking about with Paul.
Yeah. And if you, so here are these 10 things we want. How many of them are you good at? And if it's more than 3, apply for the job.
Yeah.
Because somebody's going to apply for the job that has 2 and is just going to use bluster and confidence to get through, where you probably have what they need. You can't tell from that impenetrable wall of, we want everything.
Yeah. And I tried not to be guilty of this in the past. I thought back to previous job ads I had written, and I always tried to say, well, what do I not need to put on here? What's on here that isn't really necessary? Oh, I don't really need anybody with x86 assembly experience. That's not really going to come up. That's more of a gotcha. And this thing that's in a requirement, that's actually a nice to have.
I always tried to load my nice to haves with a lot more skills than my requirements. My requirements were always pretty big in general. My nice to haves were lots.
And sometimes the nice to haves were, have you heard of this thing? Do you know what this acronym stands for? You don't necessarily have to have used it, but you have to know where to go to look it up and become familiar with it further in practical use. So anyway, Celia, write a better job ad.
Yeah, we said so.
That's all I got.
Okay, well, I should go figure out how to pull out more wires and make them do more sounds and blinks. And I've got the motor running, but it just sort of zaps you when you. Never mind. Projects later. Okay, so thank you to Christopher for producing and co-hosting, and of course, thank you for listening. Please also check out our blog and newsletter.
Are you a robot?
Yes. You can find it all on embedded.fm on the website, along with a contact link if you'd like to say hello, or you can send us email show@embedded.fm. We will be here next week, and here's a final thought to tide you over. Since it is a Christopher and Elecia babble with each other, that does mean that we should be reading Pooh. This is Winnie the Pooh, and from the last point I read, once upon a time, a very long time ago, about last Friday, Winnie the Pooh lived in a forest all by himself under the name of Sanders. What does Sanders mean? Asked Christopher Robin. It means he had the name over the door in gold letters and lived under it. Winnie the Pooh wasn't sure, Christopher Robin said. Now I am, said a growly voice. Then I will go on, said I. Embedded FM is an independently produced radio show that focuses on the many aspects of engineering. It is a production of Logical Elegance, an embedded software consulting company in California. If there are advertisements in the show, we did not put them there and do not receive any revenue from them. At this time, our sole sponsor remains Logical Elegance.